Hello and welcome to the Astro Bloom podcast. I'm here with my friend Kim Banfield. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So this is a nice little first outdoor episode of the year. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that. If it's on Spotify, you'll just have to listen in on the birds chirping in the background. So Kim, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, I'm so excited to get into what it is that you do and how you help people. I just love all of your content. It's very inspiring and very empowering for women.
Thank you.
So I'm so excited to share your wisdom with everyone listening here today.
I'm so happy to be here today, and I've been really looking forward to having this conversation.
Amazing. So first of all, I'd like to get started with, what it is that you do, just in a really kind of brief summary, and we can then dive in a bit deeper. And I'd love to share a little bit about your astrology too. So if you know your sun, moon, and rising sign, you can let the listeners know what that is, and then they can, maybe relate to you on that level as well.
Okay, so we'll start there. My sun is in Pisces, my moon is in Aries, and my ascendant is in Taurus. I am very much a Pisces in so many ways, on so many levels. Very much a Pisces. So it will probably come as no surprise to hear that the work that I do in the world with women is around intuition and the soul. So I call myself a Soulcologist because I study the soul, and I help other women to study their own soul as well, and to remember who they are and essentially become that person again. And so I do that through a platform that I'm in the process of building more of, which is Soulcology.
Oh, amazing.
And it's where women can come to learn about their intuition, to learn about what their comfort zone actually is. I don't believe in the phrase you should get out of your comfort zone. I actually believe you should get into yours and out of other people's comfort zones. And but the crux of it for me at the moment really is around intuition. So I help women to find the clarity, confidence, and the courage to listen to their intuition, to understand their intuition, and to follow through on it. And as part of that process, to really heal past experiences and find and fulfill their soul purposes. Because we don't just have one, we have many.
Yeah.
And what I love the most about that is helping women to really make their life a moment that matters, because we're not here for a long time when you think about how vast this universe is. And I know so many of us, myself included, we feel like we're living other people's lives for them, and we live life the way that society expects us to live it, except we come to a point where we realize, often during Saturn returns, we realize that's not actually my life. And that's not actually who I am. And I'm ignoring my intuition, or what even is my intuition? I don't even think it exists for me. And then we realize that it does, and that it's been trying to guide us somewhere else.
And we've usually been quieting that voice
so much,
and just being a bit like more logical about it. Here, listening to like the inner parent or whatever it might be, that conditioned voice. So
yes,
totally can resonate with that. And I don't know if we've talked about Saturn returns on here, so I can dive a little bit into that. But you said one really interesting thing. You said lots of interesting things there, but the one thing I wanted to come back to is the comfort zone.
Yes.
So you mentioned, it's you actually believe that people should get into their comfort zone more versus and actually get out of other people's comfort zones. Could you dive a little bit deeper into that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll explain how this came through for me. And I just come out of a meditation, and I saw a post from a business coach whose group I was in, and she was doing her post for the day, and it was, what are you doing today to get outside of your comfort zone to bring in income? And suddenly I had this moment where it was like time just stopped, and I just heard and felt this whole thing around, no, that's not right. That's not the way. It's not about getting out of your comfort zone. It's about getting into your comfort zone, because your comfort zone is full of the things that are comfortable to you. That's the point. Your comfort zone is where your genius lies. It's where you feel the most lit up. It's where you are being and embodying and becoming all that you're here to be. It's where you earn what you want to earn. You're connected to people that you want to be connected with. You're thriving.
It's where your gifts are.
Yes, it's where, exactly. It's where your gifts are. And so many of us grow up in and are shaped by other people's comfort zones. And so we end up living in those spaces instead. So as an example, prior to me leaving the corporate world, I was very much living society's comfort zone and the comfort zones that my parents prepared me for, right? They wanted me to be, this is nice. They wanted me to be successful in the corporate space. And you know, that's what society says. It's like, go to school, get good marks, then go to university, get good marks, get a job straight out of school, climb the corporate ladder, save money, buy a house, have a family, get married, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's very much the path that I put myself on, because that's where what I felt like I had to do. That was what I felt like, you know, if that would be pleasing to my parents, that would be pleasing to the world, that would mean that I was good and I was achieving something and I was making people happy. Except that it didn't make me happy. And it wasn't until I looked back on it when I thought, yeah, like I really was living somebody else's life. And it's the kind of life that I now look at from the perspective of like an LIEF life, a life that's a lie. Because I knew that wasn't really me, but I was still perpetuating this idea that it was. And I had the 6-figure salary, I had the car and the phone, and I was the youngest senior manager in the organization that I worked with at the time. My whole career was planned out there. And it wasn't me.
You probably felt dead inside.
My soul was so being destroyed. Destroyed.
I know.
Yeah. And it took, you know, I'd always done my healing work on the side. And I always thought it would be something that I would do later on when I had a family, and how it would fit in so nicely because I could do it from home. And then when I was 29, the universe gave me a really big kick up the butt and said, no now.
AKA the Saturn return.
AKA Saturn return happened.
So I had an episode on my friend Vika's podcast and we talked a lot about Saturn, but I haven't dove into it here really. So what the Saturn return is the point in your chart essentially, because the stars are all, or I shouldn't say stars, the planets are all moving, you know, in the sky right now. And they're affecting different areas of our natal chart as they sort of transit the different signs. And so what a Saturn return is when Saturn returns to the natal position that it was in when you were born. And this usually happens between the ages of like 29 to 30, depending on your own individual chart. But Saturn is like our biggest teacher, as you know, as I know. So Saturn is all about kind of understanding that we are mortal beings, that time is ticking, that we only have so much time in this one life, with, you know, the specific kind of purposes that we came here to carry out. And so it tends to be a time where we really learn some of these like hard lessons, and we start to really look at, you know, what's happening around us, and compare our own progress, our own achievements, our own kind of ideas of what does it take to really achieve some of these things. And compare that to like where we actually are. And so we start to really feel the pressure. And it is a lot of the times like it is the time when people decide to kind of have kids, get married, because these are all the things that are societally, you know, recognized. But for a lot of people, they start to be pushed up against some of those, you know, life goals of society, and they start to realize like, oh, that's really not me. Like I don't really, maybe I don't want to have kids. Maybe I thought I didn't want kids, but I actually do want kids. You know, maybe I thought I wanted this corporate job and it's actually making me feel entirely dead inside and it's not fulfilling in any way. So yeah, I just wanted to provide a bit of background there on what really is Saturn return and, you know, how it might show up for people. I can very much resonate with that. Like, for me, I actually don't think it's interesting because my Saturn return wasn't the time when that happened for me. I didn't really yet fully wake up to that reality during my Saturn return, which is interesting because my Saturn is in Capricorn, so it's actually quite a strong placement for Saturn. And it's in my second house of like, how do you make money, right?
Yes.
And when during my Saturn return, now that I've, reflect on it, it was a time where I, did my master's. I took the first kind of like corporate job, in academia. And I knew at the time that I didn't feel lit up by it. I almost felt an obligation
Yes.
to do it. But again, I didn't listen to my intuition because I didn't know what else to do. I had all this debt from being in grad school, from being in school. And it just felt like, oh, this is what I have to do. Like it was a very disempowering way of kind of going about the next big step in my life. And it wasn't until I had a big like Pluto transit trigger my chart and oppose my Chiron that, yeah, I just kind of had this awakening of like, wow, I feel so incredibly dead inside.
Yes.
And like nothing I do is making this like emptiness go away.
Yes.
And that's when I really started to like decondition and peel back the layers.
Yeah. I so resonate with so much of what you just said, like just remembering what it was like to be sitting in the office and just know that this is not my chair to be sitting in.
Yeah.
And the realization of, but if it's not mine and I know I'm not meant to be here, then I'm actually taking somebody else's
There's so much guilt.
I'm taking, and that was more of what got me out of there than my own intuition per se, because at the time I was not listening to it. And I'll share in a second what the crux moment of that was.
Yeah.
But just that realization of I'm taking somebody else's sole purpose here. Like I'm sitting in a chair that's not mine, which means they're not fulfilling their purpose and neither am I. And that was quite a shock to me because I thought, wow, like, okay, it's not meant to be like this. But the moment where I really realized that I was continuing to perpetuate this living in somebody else's comfort zone was when I was offered the next management position up from mine. And at the time I had said to my family and my friends, I don't want this role. If they offer it to me, it's not for me. Like it was a whole body no. Like I just knew it was a no. And so I said to everybody, I don't want it. Remind me that I don't want this.
Yeah.
And of course it came around. They offered it to me. It was just me and my general manager sitting in this little meeting room together. And she said, we want to offer you the position. And then she went on, to talk about, and these are the benefits, and this is the package, and this is the thing. And like, we're so grateful that like we've got someone like you that we can offer this position to because the team already loves you and you're just going to step right in. And we know that you're really people orientated, so we won't keep you in this area. We'll eventually move you to the people department. And she had like the next 2 to 5 years planned out for me. And she was talking about it. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
And this is awful. And then she said, so what do you think? Do you want the job? And I went, yes.
Oh no.
And that just gave me like goosebumps on my head. And then I went, why the F did I say yes? And suddenly there was this moment where it was like, so for me, like my soul has always felt like it has resided in my belly button area of my body. I've always felt like it lives there. And this particular experience really like told me that it did, because if your soul was like a tennis ball, imagine a tennis ball feeling like it's popping out of your belly button, and it was like an angry teenager, and it stormed towards the door, and the door was like open, like this much, and it like kind of like stood in the doorway, I guess you could say.
It was like, I'm out of here.
And yelled at me and said, when you are finally ready to listen, maybe we'll come back.
Wow.
And like she's chatting away and I'm like, where is this voice coming from? What the hell was that? Why did I say yes when the answer was no? And then suddenly there was this flood of all these times previously where I'd said yes when the answer was no. And I was like, why do I keep perpetuating this pattern of saying yes when I know the answer is no. And I didn't want to disappoint her. I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want her to think that I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to think to myself that I was saying no because I couldn't do it. I didn't want to feel inadequate either. It didn't seem like there was anybody else who could do the role. I didn't want to leave my team in the lurch. There were so many things. And I just this people-pleasing pattern just culminated in this moment where my soul and also my intuition, because for me, intuition is the voice of your soul, was just like, we've been trying so hard to get your attention, and we can't make you say no. You are the person who actually has to say no. So in that moment, it was like I'd been hollowed out on the inside, and I suddenly realized that I was the one who was continuing to live in the comfort zones of, at this point in time, my boss, the organization I worked with, my family, because I was petrified that they would think that I was a lost cause if they really knew that I wanted to follow all of the spiritual energy healing, intuition endeavors that I'd been learning about for the previous 10 years, that I couldn't make a career out of that, because 2 years prior to that, I'd moved organizations. And the first thought I had was, oh, great, now I can go and do my healing work. I can go and do Reiki and tarot and all of those things that I love, which was very quickly followed by the thought of, but you can't make money doing that. How are you going to support yourself?
Yeah, I definitely know that voice also.
Yeah. And so I went back into another corporate position, which was this one. And when that hollowed out feeling came, I was like, I cannot keep doing this to myself. I just can't, because now I already felt dead inside. Now I really do feel completely dead inside. And I also struggled at the time with going, but I can't turn around and say no now, because I've already said yes. Look at her. She's so excited. She's so thrilled by this. It's going to make the team so happy. I'll give it a go. And it was a terrible 6 months. My mental health declined rapidly. I was constantly thinking of, how can I get out of this job? How can I get out of this position? How can I escape this prison that I've built myself? And things kept happening where we were going through budget time at the beginning of the year. So this happened in October of 2013. And then we went through budget time in January of 2014. And the organization that I worked with was an emergency services organization. So we had a budget of money, but we also had a budget of man hours so that we could bring people off road to teach. I worked in the education department of that organization. As we were going through that process, so many things kept happening. And I was just like, I actually don't have to put up with this. And I don't want to, and I don't have to. So I will get my team through this budget. I will fight to get them everything that they need, and then I will resign. And just when I made the decision to resign, I decided my gift to my 30th birthday for myself would be to resign. And just as I went to do that, the manager, who we used to be co-managers, he came to me and told me he was resigning.
Oh my God, this is crazy.
And it was like the universe's way of being like, are you sure? We're going to test you, and we're going to see how much you have realized and perhaps overcome this people-pleasing pattern and this pattern of living in other people's comfort zones. And we're going to get him to resign at the same time as you. Let's see how this plays out. So we had a meeting, and I didn't know he was resigning at the time. And I said, I've got something to tell you. He's like, me too. I'll go first. I said, okay. So then he told me he was resigning, and I was like, inside I went, oh my God, that means I can't resign. Like that means I can't. And he's like, what was your news? I was like, oh, actually, I was going to resign as well. And he said, don't you dare not resign. He said, don't you dare. He's like, I know you, and I know that you're probably feeling really guilty right now that you're going to leave at the same time. This is not yours to fix. This is not yours to solve. You must go as well.
What a wonderful message.
I know.
That man.
Like, he was like, we'd always got along really well throughout our whole co-managing.
That was the universe gifting you a nudge right through him.
Yes, yeah, that was him being like, that permission that you're so desperately seeking, here it is. And so I said, okay. And he's like, promise me, like, pinky promise me right now that you will resign too. And I said, okay, I will. And so a week after I turned 30, I went into a meeting with my general manager, and she said to me, what are we going to do about this person resigning? And I said, on that note,
I'm also resigning.
And I pushed my letter across the table and I said, I'm resigning too.
Oh, amazing.
And she said, is there anything I can do to keep you? And I said, no. Like I've met with HR, I've discussed things. I'd already had a plan in place to work a 9-day fortnight. So I already had a 1 day off a week to do my work and to study and to really, keep that spiritual side of me alive. And it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
It just wasn't. And as much as I had tried so hard to live in two worlds, to live in, I guess, in two comfort zones for how I now understand it, I just couldn't anymore. And I said to her, you've done everything to support me in this space, and I'm so grateful for that. And I still have to do this. And I can't even explain why. Like, the calling is so great. And part of me was like, I kind of wish it wasn't this way. Like, why can't I be normal? Why can't I just have a normal job like normal people do, and not be this, like,
have this deep need?
Yes. Yeah. To want to go into like the soul realm and intuition and all of these things. And yet I cannot ignore it anymore.
Yeah. Wow. What a powerful way to like take your power back, right? Like,
yeah,
and I know personally how much courage it takes. So yeah, it's actually really quite ironic, some of the synchronicities in your story and mine that I went through recently. But yeah, so many avenues I kind of want to go down there. So yeah, really interesting take on the comfort zone thing. I love that. I know that a lot of people do say, a lot of the growth happens in your zone of discomfort. And I would say one of the teachings in astrology does kind of lean towards that, because when we look at comfort zones, we look at the nodes in astrology. So the south node and the north node.
Yep.
And the north node is kind of like where you're meant to be headed, but it does feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because you don't know that energy.
Exactly.
Very well. But it doesn't mean that it's not, like, it is your soul purpose, and it is a lot of what you're learning.
Yeah.
But basically what you have to do actually to get to your north node is you do have to live the full expression of your south node, because the south node is like where you've come from.
Right.
And it is the gifts that you carry in from many previous lifetimes, but you also carry a lot of the shadow aspects of that energy. And so what often happens is we end up maybe living in a lot of the shadow expression of our south node. And so we actually need to kind of raise our south node first to the highest vibration. And so that really is that that message that you just shared of like getting into your comfort zone, getting really intimate with your comfort zone, so that you can understand what is the light, what is the shadow, and how do I like actually embody the light, and how do I take all of the great gifts that I have from my comfort zone and apply them to maybe this area that I'm not as familiar with, right?
Yes.
But that is very unique to me still, and it's not someone else's comfort zone.
Yes. Yeah. And your comfort zone will feel uncomfortable, and you will feel a sense of discomfort with it initially, because you haven't really been in it before.
Exactly. And
it's not until you give yourself permission to spend time in your own comfort zone that you start to feel that sense of peacefulness that comes from being in that place. But you also get to explore, like, what else is in my comfort zone? Everything is uncomfortable when you first start to do it, for the most part, and so your comfort zone is going to keep evolving as you do it. It's not going to stay this static, stagnant thing. It's not designed to. It evolves with you, and as you grow through ages and chapters of your life, parts of you become more available to you than they were before.
Yeah.
And that also feels uncomfortable initially, but that doesn't mean that it's not yours.
Yeah.
It becomes yours the more you allow yourself to do it, or to embody it, or to practice it, or whatever that is. And that's when you land in your comfort zone. And that's also when you can visit other people's without getting lost in theirs and getting dragged back into that space. So I can work with women in corporate now. A lot of women I work with either are in corporate or have a background in corporate, and I can happily sit with them in that space now without having this like triggered effect in my body of like, oh my God, the corporate space was awful. I mean, in so many ways it wasn't either. It prepared me so well for what I do now, but I can sit in that space with them and I can visit that comfort zone. Or even women who love that space and that is for them, I can sit in that space with them and I can visit their comfort zone, but I can hold my own at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the comfort zone, like it does get this like bad rep.
It does.
Because people think of it a certain way. I think the way that a lot of us talk about the comfort zone in like the, you know, the healing spiritual realm is like, this is this area of stagnancy and like, there's it. I feel like that word just stagnation comes to mind when you think about the comfort zone. And that is the comfort zone that we don't want to be in, right? So we don't want to be in the like stagnant comfort zone of not growing, not evolving. But I love the way that you're phrasing the comfort zone in a very different way. So thank you for sharing that. One of the things that you said there that just like really resonated with me is you said it was like a whole body no, right? When you lost that job. And even just the little test from the universe there, so interesting, because I just wanted to share this with you because the synchronicity is hilarious. So as you know, I like resigned from my full-time job in academia where I was for like 6 years in April of this year. And it basically I was on like a 2-person team, essentially. It was me and my boss. And I finally like, so I was on a full-time contract. So I was on a contract for like 6 years and then they offered me an extension like way earlier than I thought it would come. Like I knew it was probably coming and I prepared myself to kind of say no, in March sometime, but it came in like February and I was so not prepared. I was like, I didn't think I was going to have to make this decision right now. Like I knew I had gotten to that point where I couldn't exist in 2 spaces anymore. Like I was getting so burnt out trying to run a business and working full time. And, it just was too much. And after COVID, we had to go in, 3 days a week into the office and it was just becoming way too much. So I knew something had to change. And my boss came to me and like offered me the 2-year extension and everything in my body was like, I can't do it. Like I cannot say to the universe, I want one thing. And then put my name on this piece of paper, right? Like it's sending such mixed signal. It doesn't make any sense. And again, it felt like signing my soul away in some way, right? And so basically I held on replying to the offer until the last possible minute because I didn't know how to, like, I was so afraid of disappointing him. And it was someone that I did really admire. And he was a very like caring boss, like I really respected him in a lot of ways, but that made the people pleasing even worse, right? It was like I really just wanted him to see me as a successful person and like this reliable person and all the things. So I basically held out until the last second and that day we had a meeting. He was like, oh, like just a reminder, you need to sign your offer or you need to respond to your offer. And I was like, yep, I'm gonna respond to it. And then literally like a few hours before I was like, okay, can we have a meeting? And I, because he basically said like, let me know if there's anything you want to discuss. And I was like, well, the only thing I really want to discuss is like going to part-time. Because I knew I wasn't the type of person that would just like take the leap. I knew I wanted some kind of security net. And he was like, yeah, that's like, it's not going to happen. So at that point I was like, okay, well, I can't go back now. So I guess I'm resigning. Literally the same day I got an offer for a maternity leave replacement in another office in the same organization I was working with. And I had to be like, you know what, I'm actually like about to resign. So I can't do this. Like I can't take another full-time job. And then a week to the day after I resigned, my boss resigned.
Really?
He got a job like closer to home. And it was the biggest confirmation ever of like, I dodged the biggest bullet because I had already done like a sabbatical type replacement for him. And I knew deep in my soul, like that was not for me. Like I didn't want any more responsibility. I didn't want to invest any more energy into like a manager type role
Yes.
with this organization because it was like more draining, more responsibility. Yeah, more money. But at that point, I really didn't care.
No.
Like I had what I needed in terms of money. And yeah, that was like the biggest kind of like gift from the universe saying like you made the right choice because you know I would have had to take on two people's work.
Yep.
I would have had to, you know, maybe even train the person that was filling in for him because eventually because I didn't want that role.
Right.
So yeah, it was but again a test, right?
Yes.
To be like, yeah, are you really gonna go through with this? Because he's also leaving.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes like we don't like the thing with our intuition is we very rarely know the full story.
Yeah.
We very rarely know all the reasons why we have to say yes or no to something, but we also don't know all the reasons that like right now. Sometimes we don't find them out till even like years later. We look back and we go, oh, this makes so much sense now. At the time, it didn't make any sense at all. But now it does because I can see how this led to this, led to this, led to this, and so on.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Good for you. Yeah. But I feel like, I mean, we wouldn't have met otherwise, and that would be sad.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. It's kind of crazy, yeah, because sometimes you do get these confirmations from the universe later on, but sometimes it takes forever. And I think trusting your intuition in the world that we live in, where we've been taught not to really trust our intuition, it does feel a lot like taking a big leap of faith sometimes, right?
Oh, it does.
But I think it really takes building that faith and trust in yourself to be able to follow your intuition. So I'd love to get your perspective on, like what does that look like? What does it look like to follow your intuition? Like how do you teach women to do this?
Yeah.
I just love to dive a little bit deeper into that.
Oh, I that's like one of my favorite things to talk about. And I guess the thing I'll say first is you can understand what your intuition is telling you. You can know what the message is and where the guidance is directing you to go. But unless you follow it, it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. Like you actually have to physically take the steps or physically resign, if you will, in order to build that trust muscle with your intuition. Yeah. Because you can know what it means, but if you don't trust it or if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to go through with it. And instead you'll just get super frustrated with, why am I getting the same message? Or why is it not changing? And it's because you're not following through on your part. Your intuition, your soul has done its part. It's told you where to go. But then it's up to you to move through like the mindset muck, if you will, to then follow through on it. And sometimes you've got to do it with your eyes closed. I've definitely done it with my eyes closed and a glass of red wine in my hand, where I'm like, okay, push this button, sign up for this thing because my intuition says so, but I'm so scared and I'm going to do it anyway. Sometimes you've got to recognize that following your intuition and trusting it is going to come with a very healthy dose of self-doubt. Yeah. And you can do it anyway, because that's been so much of the story of my life, and indeed so many of the women that I work with. And so how I teach this to women, I guess in a general sense, is I teach 3 different languages, if you will, of your intuition. And it always astounded me how people talk about how, you know, intuition is this woo-woo supernatural concept. And it is, right? Like there's absolutely aspects of it that are like that. But so much of it focuses on that. And in some respects, it gets a really bad name from that perspective. And that's why I feel like so many women are challenged by connecting to their intuition, because they don't want to be seen as woo-woo. They don't want to be seen as witchy. They don't want to be seen as any of these like words that are said with a derogatory type energy. And yet the way I look at it now is like, why not? Like, why not? Like that's innately who we are as women. Like we are of the earth. So we're going to be a bit woo-woo. We're going to be a bit witchy. Like we're actually designed that way. Yeah. So I do teach the supernatural language of intuition, and like teaching women about like cycles and cards, and like thinking about like colors and auras and things like that that are a little bit more kind of on that side of things. But the way that I see it is, it's supernatural, sure, but it's also supernatural. It's innate to you.
Yeah.
Like, it's innate. We are constantly surrounded by symbols and so many objects and people that have various meanings in our lives and so on. And where do you think that comes from? Like, where is it represented?
Yeah.
It's represented in tarot. So I teach that. Before we get to that point, I teach about the logical and the practical languages of intuition. And so the logical languages are around your like pain, injury, illness, and cravings. Like, how is your body speaking to you through pain? Because each part of the body has a spiritual meaning associated with it. So if you're getting headaches, it's not just because you're staring at a computer for too long. Like, that's part of it, sure. But when you dig a little bit deeper, there's so much more associated with what's playing out in your life and why you're having a headache. And a headache is your intuition's way of like basically like knocking on your head and going, something's not right. Like, someone or something is causing a headache in your life. You now have a physical manifestation and representation of that. It's not just because you're staring at a screen all day.
Yeah.
If you're also thinking, my God, my boss is such a headache, I hate my job, da 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 da, and you've got a headache, it's because
you're literally manifesting.
Your job is a headache.
Yeah.
The way that you are living your life is a headache.
Yeah.
So I teach all about the different parts of the body and what they mean spiritually, but then also what they mean for you. Because it's one thing to know the theory behind intuition and what, the head means and shoulders mean and et cetera, et cetera. And it's a whole other thing to know what it means for you.
Yeah.
And so there's a component where I'll teach like a series of questions or ways that you can approach understanding and deconstructing what is my intuition trying to tell me here.
Mm-hmm.
And also teaching you in a sense how to build up the courage to go there. Because it can be hard to look at that and go, yeah, like that really does mean that I need to leave my job. But what about all of these things? I've got a family to support. I've got bills to pay.
That's where people get stuck.
It totally is. And it's because, again, like we've been socially raised and even like within our families to be told that, a job plus this amount of income equals safety and security.
Yeah.
And yet I really feel like the last couple of years and even right now, the climate that we're in is teaching us that actually, no, it doesn't mean that. It might mean a false sense of security, but it doesn't mean ongoing security. So I teach about that. I teach about illness in the body and like what different types of illness are from an intuitive perspective. I teach about injuries. I know I teach about cravings, especially for women, right? Like cravings during the different times of our cycles, even like cravings in pregnancy, cravings during different times in our lives. They all tell us something about what it is that we're really needing, but we're needing it from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we're eating chocolate around the time of our period, that's one of mine. I know it's because and yes, I need something that's in the chocolate for my body, but I'm also looking for sweetness. I'm looking to treat myself with love and affection. And I'm also wanting that little dopamine hit from, the caffeinated nature of some of the chocolate to make me feel better. Give me that little dopamine high when I'm like, oh, period pain sucks and so on.
Yeah.
So they're the logical ones that I teach about. And then from the practical level, before I go there, when you approach intuition from that perspective, when you look at it and you go, of course, this pain is sending me a message. Of course, my body is speaking to me. It makes logical sense. It no longer sits out there as this woo-woo concept of, intuition is so wild and out there. And yeah, it is, but it's also so logical in how it communicates with you. We've just told ourselves for so long that it isn't, and we go to the surface first instead of going to the soul as well. I'm going, what else is here? Oh my God, of course it makes sense that I've got a headache because my job is a headache. Of course, that makes logical sense. Then we go into the practical and we look at things like sleep, where we're like, what? And this is particularly relevant for me of late, as you know, what time am I waking up at night? And what does that mean in terms of how it corresponds to the meridians in my body?
Yeah.
What is that telling me and teaching me about?
Mine's always around 3 a.m. and it's the liver.
Yep, it's the liver.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I always have a blocked liver chi whenever I go to acupuncture.
Yep. Which also makes sense too, given that the liver is about anger. You're a manifester, so am I.
Yes.
And what organ represents anger? The liver.
Right. No, and it's funny because, sorry to like
Go ahead.
interject here, but it actually got so much better after I quit my job.
Oh,
And I did like this
interesting.
like detoxing too, and did
Uh-huh.
some traditional Chinese medicine herbs, and it's really like unblocked my liver channel
Wow.
and made my cycle so much better, because
Oh.
that's the one way I know that I'm like withholding things.
Yes.
Is I always feel it in my liver. Like I literally feel a stagnation, and my cycle gets super painful and like really just like intense.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for that. I'm
Yeah.
going to take that on board.
Yeah.
Yes.
But sorry. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Yeah, so I teach about that. And again, like, whilst it may mean this on the surface theoretically, but what does it mean for you?
Yeah.
And again, like a series of questions and coaching around the courage to listen to that and unpack that, but then the courage to do something about it.
Yeah.
I talk about signs, where we start to get a little bit more woo-woo with things, and like the different types of signs that can show up and what they mean, and a couple of other areas as well. So, and we like, one of the areas we talk about is different circumstances in your life. Like one of the things we go in depth with is, what does a car accident mean?
Yeah.
And what is being hit or hitting different parts of a car? What does that mean? And how does that correspond to your life? Were you the driver or were you a passenger?
Yeah.
And what does that mean to
And what
you?
is it teaching you?
What is it teaching you? And that came from, I had an experience where this was about actually no longer than that. It would have been 2016. And I was holding myself back from launching something. Actually, it was launching the very first iteration of the Intuitive Woman program. And I was like, oh, I'm scared. Like, what if nobody wants this program? What if no one wants to do it? What if it sucks? I'll just delay the launch. And I had this experience where I was driving into a car park of a shopping center in Melbourne, where I'm from. And I had the green arrow to turn right. And I heard this voice say to me, like, filled up the car. It was like, go fast. And I was like, all right. So I went fast and like zipped around the corner, and suddenly out of nowhere came this red sedan speeding. It sped through a red light here. It sped through a red light here. So if you're watching the video, you can see what I'm doing, but I'm marking out where the traffic lights were, and missed my car by like centimeters,
Wow.
if that. And I went, whoa. Like I drove in, I found a car park, and I just sat there and I went, well, that was a very big message received. Everything can be taken away so very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And what am I waiting for? Like, yeah, I'm scared, but like, what is that when this work might never, ever, ever get out into the world?
Yeah.
And women may not learn this knowledge and apply it in their lives. Like, what does it mean if, like, what's it for?
Yeah.
If it just ends like that and it doesn't get out there. So I launched like 3 days later, and like, okay, we do not need to repeat this one. Like, thank you for that and for keeping me here, but also like, let's not do that again.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So much to unpack there, and so many powerful teachings. And I had no idea that you dove into like really how it shows up in your body. And that's obviously something I really love, you know, being someone who teaches and practices yoga.
Yes.
And really like mixes that with astrology and like the energetics.
Yep.
So one of the things that I found really interesting about what you said was, you know, you talk a lot about intuition and it's showing up in the body. So in medical astrology, and I kind of, it's, so basically when I started really delving into astrology and like offering readings and all that, I was always really drawn to the moon, because for me, like being born on a full moon with the Virgo sun and a Pisces moon, I was always very much living in my Virgo sun.
Right.
So I kind of, because the moon becomes usually a pretty shadowed planet in your chart, because it's like, it is the subconscious mind, right? The sun is the conscious, the moon is the yin or the feminine, and the sun is the masculine or the yang. So we end up living and reaching for that sun all the time because of the society that we live in.
Yes.
And we often forget to kind of build that secure foundation, give ourselves that emotional security that we're craving by connecting with our moon sign and with that more feminine energy. And then, you know, bringing those two into balance. Really.
Yes.
So it's interesting that, you know, what we're really talking about here is the moon sign, because the moon sign is the intuition, right?
Yes.
And in medical astrology, the moon is actually what forms the basis of like a lot of the physical imbalances that occur in your life. Because the moon represents, yes, intuition and your emotions. And we both know that, you know, emotions are energy in motion, and they need to stay in motion. And when they get stagnant or they get stuck or not expressed and all these things, they cause imbalances in our energetic field. And everything begins on the energetic level. So
Yes.
it then manifests as pain, tension, illness, all of these things. So basically, yeah, when we're looking at medical astrology, one of the most important signifiers of health is the moon, because of this correspondence to the emotions. Because also your nervous system responds to your emotions. So that means all of the physical processes in your body respond to how you are dealing with your emotions.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the other things that you mentioned is you use this example of headaches. And I'm wondering, is that something that was prevalent in your life in terms of like, you know, feeling? Okay.
So no, it wasn't for me, but
Okay.
for a lot of the women that I work with,
Okay.
like headaches are a thing. And when I look back on like my mum, for example, she regularly had headaches. And there were so many things internally for her that were, I guess, a headache.
Yeah.
So I look back on that now, and so many aspects of that, like of her life, and even like some of the like medical things that she has, where I'm like, I understand that more now from that soul level in terms of how that was physically manifesting for her and what that meant from an intuitive perspective that it was telling her. Right.
No, the reason I ask is because your moon sign being in Aries, Aries is associated with the head.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I touch wood.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I it's very, very rare for me to get a headache.
Okay.
Very,
good.
very rare.
Good.
I couldn't even tell you the last time
That's good.
that I had one.
Probably because you follow your intuition.
Yeah. I'll keep following it then,
Yeah.
because headaches and migraines and whatnot do not seem fun
No.
at all.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, very interesting correlation there, because that's really cool. I mean, I think it's, to us who live in this space, it is kind of comes as obvious, right? But I think a lot of people maybe don't draw that connection between like emotions and where they live in the body and how they show up and how that can really manifest on a physical level, right?
Yeah, they don't. They sort of tend to go straight for the surface in terms of, you know, like for me, my lower back has been such a great teacher throughout my life from that intuitive perspective. And it's so easy for the mind to go, oh, it's because you've got poor form at the gym. It's because you sit at a chair all day. And like I said, maybe those things are contributing to it too. But also, what else is there?
Yeah.
You know, lower backs are about financial security. They're about connection to community. They're about so many different facets of that if you're feeling really stuck and challenged financially and your lower back is painful or it's giving out, then it's highly likely it's because you're holding a lot of fear energy in that part of your body, and your body is sending you a message to do something with that.
Yeah.
To seek support or to support yourself in that space, and instead of like quote unquote backing yourself into a corner or feeling like you're being backed into a corner and you've got no control, you've got no opportunity to get out. Like, you know, there's so many different word plays here that you can use with the different parts of the body that really do symbolize that intuitive message. And it can get laughed off so much, like, oh, ha ha ha, like you're backing yourself into a corner, except that it's so real that you are, that it really does need to be addressed. And so when I teach it in terms of this journey from the logical language into the practical language into the supernatural language, by the time we get to the supernatural stuff, people are more ready to accept that and to recognize that actually like they hold so much intuition in those spaces as well, because their brain is like, oh, intellectually I get it, of course the body means something, of course sleep times mean something, of course circumstances are wake-up calls in our lives and so on. Oh yeah, like this more supernatural woo-woo stuff, yeah, like we're on board with that now. We can now
because you're opening them up to
exactly
be able to receive that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you know, I see intuition as being this really practical, logical thing that does have science behind it. It does have deeper meaning. It's not, you know, none of this stuff is just, I mean, everything's made up on some level, but none of this stuff is made up.
Yeah.
It's real. And one of the ways that you can know that it's real is because you can actually feel it and experience in your body.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, one of the things that I also wanted to kind of track back on is that almost car accident that you had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm actually reading this book on medical astrology.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they talk about is how certain circumstances in life, whether it is like an external event or a disease, they really are the universe trying to get you back on the right path, right?
Yes.
So I think a lot of times when we have these things happen to us, we can really easily enter that victim mentality of like, oh, poor me, like, why is this always happening to me? I definitely have always been like that. Like, I don't want to say have always, because I'm not like that anymore, but like for a long time, I was always like that with my car. Like I would always have like these older cars and things would always happen to my car. And I'd be like, oh, I can never have nice things. You know, like my car always gets hit, or like I get into a car accident, and like I just enter this like victim mentality so easily previously. And I feel like in recent years, that's really shifted, where it's like, okay, yeah, like this happened to my car. It doesn't mean anything personal to me. It doesn't mean that I can't have nice things.
No.
It's just, it's teaching me something else, like whatever, right? It's just a car.
Yep.
So not attaching that really personally to yourself, and like seeing beyond the physical.
Yeah.
But what's one of the interesting things that they talk about in this book is basically it's like it also depends on your level of consciousness.
Totally.
What actually happens. So if you are, you know, semi-conscious and you know you need to do something, but you're not following your intuition, what often happens is it will manifest as disease or an imbalance in the body, because you know that this is happening and you feel it internally, but you're either like suppressing it, you're not expressing it, or whatever. So it often will come about as like some kind of imbalance in the body.
Yeah.
If you are completely kind of unconscious to your intuition or to what you maybe need to actually do to get back on path, it often happens as like an external event. So like a car accident, or, you know, something like that kind of like really shakes you and wakes you up.
Yes.
Hopefully to your intuition. So yeah, I found that really interesting. Like way of them kind of explaining that in the book. And of course, like if you are quite conscious and you're following your intuition, it doesn't mean that like you're always going to be perfectly healthy, nothing's ever going to happen to you. Those kinds of things still might be like part of your lesson in life, to learn through the body, to learn through illness, to learn through, you know, maybe an accident or something like that. Not necessarily true, but yeah, like just saying, you know, it's not, if you're following your intuition, it doesn't mean you're immune from anything ever happening to you. But
no, I like to say that following your intuition does not guarantee a Disney ending, because that's not the point. Like the point of it is not that you're going to get everything that you ever wanted. You might get even more than you ever wanted. You could get better than that. You could get different than that and realize that that's actually what you wanted. But it's not about this Disney ending. I feel like sometimes it's talked about in terms of, well, you follow your intuition, like everything will be perfect. No, it won't. You're still going to have the ups and downs of life. Like we still exist biorhythmically. So you're still going to have ups and downs. You're still going to have times where you feel really well and times where you don't. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. And I feel like one of the things that is important to acknowledge here is that even if you are following your intuition and you're doing it because you want it to turn out perfectly, then that's just another form of perfectionism showing up in your life in a different way. Control. And exactly, and control. So when it's not about that, like so much of intuition is about letting go of control. Like you can control the fact that you're listening to it. You can control the fact that you're following it. That's kind of enough of control. Like let the universe, in some respects, take the wheel and do its part too. Because
having that faith.
And it's co-creation.
Okay, I have one last question for you. Okay. So one of the things that you talked about is like, you know, like bringing this stuff to consciousness, like becoming aware of it, connecting with your intuition, but then having the courage to actually listen to it. So what does that look like? Because for me, I think what we're really talking about here is like connecting with the feminine, right? Connecting with the intuition, understanding how to work with that, but then being able to balance that with a healthy masculine of like taking the inspired action.
Yep.
But yeah, what does that really look like in practice? Because I feel like I've definitely, I've been through that. You've been through that. And I'm sure it looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, how maybe like a word of advice for people that might be in this space and they're aware of the things they need to take steps towards, but they just can't find maybe the courage to do so.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, I would say if you can get yourself support in this space, then do that. One of the greatest things I did was to get myself support during that time. Someone that I could, talk to about my fears and to unravel like some previous life experiences that felt like they were holding me back and had all the power in this space of not allowing me to step into like who I really am and what I'm really here to do. So first and foremost is the support side of things, but you can support yourself in other ways too. Like one of the things that I do on a regular basis is I'll pull a daily card. And I'll do that for two reasons. One is because that connects me to my intuition from that more, I guess, esoteric level. But it also is for practical guidance in terms of like, what is the step for me to take today?
Right.
And instead of making it like you have to do this, if your intuition is like, leave your job, seeing as how that's been, so much of what we've talked about, it may not necessarily be about like leaving your job right now.
Yeah.
Like if that feels like it's too much of a stretch for you, then for the love of yourself and keeping yourself sane, don't go and resign tomorrow. Unless you're in a position where you feel like you can do that. So it might be about looking at from that practical level, okay, what do I need to do to support myself to leave my job? And looking at it from that more logical perspective so your brain can get on board with it and can see that other options exist and are available to you.
The safety.
So you can create the safety. You've got somewhere to land.
Yeah.
And so for me, that looked like I spoke to a clinic in Melbourne and where I could start working as a practitioner when I left my job. So I did that in the February. I resigned in the March. I gave myself, I think, 8 weeks off. And then I started there in the June.
Yeah.
Because I resigned in March, left in April.
That's so
of
funny.
2014.
Well, it's always that time of year, right? Because things are ending and then they're beginning.
So it was right on point with that. And then I started there in the June. So it's do what you can instead of ruminating on, oh my God, I'm going to leave my job. And what does that mean? And
going down the spiral,
the spiral and perpetuating some of the anxiousness and even like up leveling some of the more body symptoms you might be experiencing in that space. Look at what can I do to make this journey safe for me? And that too gets your brain into problem solving mode instead of freak out mode. Your brain is there to solve problems, is there to hold information. So look at like, are there other job options that you want? Like, what is it that you want to be doing now? One of the biggest things that women can't answer is, what do you want?
Yeah.
And so I didn't ask myself what I wanted till I was 29. It wasn't until I realized then that I was like, I've always done what other people have wanted. Never actually asked myself what I want. So as part of this process, ask yourself what you want and look at the smaller steps you can take. Maybe it's simply going and looking at a bunch of websites. Maybe it's looking at what other jobs are available to you. Maybe it's doing some training. Like maybe it's putting a plan in place that you can go step by step on towards the resigning for your job.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times, yes, your intuition won't give you a time frame per se. Sometimes it's oddly specific, but most of the time it doesn't give you a time frame.
Yeah.
And that's in respect of you following the process that you need to follow.
Exactly. And
until you can get to the point where you're like, okay, like now I can resign.
And sometimes there's a breaking point where you're
totally.
like, you just, because I felt like
now.
Because I felt like the way that I left my job was like, it was not the way I ever imagined it. I didn't think I would feel safe. I didn't necessarily feel entirely safe. Like my root chakra had a fun time in April for sure.
Yes.
But then that, a part-time opportunity did come up again at the place that I was at, and it did kind of bring that back into balance, right?
Yes.
So it allowed me to have the security, physical security, to then have the creative energy to do the things I need to do, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's about I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to creating the safety and security. And that's a lot of actually what I also focus on in terms of like astrology, is because the moon is how you create like emotional security for yourself, how you nurture yourself, how you practice that self-care to create the foundation.
Right.
But then of course, you still have to create that physical security for yourself in some way. And I think that's really what you've been speaking to in terms of like having this courage, like like stepping more into that masculine of like taking the steps, right? Like laying out the actual process of what that looks like and breaking it up into baby steps so that it's not like this big overwhelming thing that just causes you to have more anxiety, to have, you know, these spiraling thoughts and things like that. So, it's amazing.
And Thank you. You're very, very welcome. And the last thing I would say is, you know, we say it all the time, but listen to your body.
Yeah.
Because it really is speaking to you every single day, so many moments, and there's so much wisdom in there that it is really wanting you to understand. And sometimes it will speak louder, which means you might be experiencing more of something.
Yeah.
But that's because it's trying to get you to pay attention to it and to understand it more. So always look at it from the perspective of what could this be telling me?
Yeah.
Because that's, from an intuitive perspective, there's so much available there.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, I feel like we could talk about this forever, and we probably have to have a part 2 because there's just so much. But I'd love for you to just share, you know, where people can find you. I'll obviously throw everything in the show notes, but if there's anything specific you wanted to like tell them about right now, or ways to find you.
You can find me on Instagram. That's where I like to hang out the most. You can find me at Soulcology _ so SOULCOLOGY _ or you can find me at Kimberley _ Banfield _ as well.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for tuning in today. I really hope that you enjoyed all of this wisdom that Kim shared with us. I can't wait to have you back because there's so much more we need to unpack. So hope you have a nice day.